morning, rise in freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com. How are you feeling today? Oh, really? On a Monday? I wonder why. Maybe you're excited that the Wake Up America show is back in action. First of all, before I start, I have to say big shout out, congratulations, and thank you to my brother Justin Peterson for filling in for me 2 weeks ago while I was away on my vacation. He definitely deserves a big round of applause, and congratulations to Justin for getting cast in the Boston Pops version of Ragtime. Congrats to that. Big news as well. Justin's moving and shaking all over the place. Congrats, brother. So glad for you. And I'm sure that everybody really enjoyed it. I heard lots of good feedback from his performance on the Wake Up America show. What do you think? Does Justin need to have his own show? Yeah, I think he needs to get his own show as well. Maybe we'll set him up with that when we finally turn into a big network. Good morning to Quest Fanning, Bert Crash, Caleb Vanderfeldt, Chris Morrill, John Rail, my brother Justin Peterson is joining us here, and Robbie as well. Nice to see you all here today. It's time to get back in action. What do you say? I'll give you a quick little update on how the trip was in Japan. 2 beautiful weeks in an absolutely gorgeous country. Japan, probably one of the only countries that's safer than the United States. There are a few. But I have to say, a beautiful country, absolutely clean. The cities are clean. The public transportation is clean. The toilets are amazing. They sprayed a little water up your butt after you're done, and it's, I know.
God!
It's actually quite nice.
God, please, no! No!
But it's not the water spraying up your butt that's the best part about the toilets. It's, even when you go into the public transportation bathrooms, that the bathrooms are clean and they have the little bidet that you can use that one in the public restrooms. But even in the public restrooms, the toilets are heated. It's like, it's quite nice, I have to say. Of course, the food is delicious. The culture was amazing. We got to see a geisha show. We got to go to a sword shop. We got to visit the Imperial Palace in Kyoto. We got to go inside of Osaka Castle. It was the trip of a lifetime, and I'm looking for Stephanie and I actually were going to try and do a show on Friday, but we only got in 2 hours before the show would have started, and we were messed up. And honestly, I'm still messed up. I woke up at 2 a.m. this morning. The jet lag is still getting to me. I don't know. Have you ever flown before and experienced jet lag on like a 13-hour basis? I've sometimes experienced jet lag when I've flown from New York to California, where it's like a 4-hour difference or whatever. But a 13-hour difference, I was just like, whoa. All weekend, Stephanie and I are feeling all kinds of messed up, and I just have not felt the same since. I don't know if you've ever experienced that kind of jet lag before, but it definitely messed me up, and I'm still kind of messed up about it. But anyways, let's get to the show. Boy, a lot of stuff happened while I was gone. Shooting by a transgender in a Christian school happened immediately as soon as I was on vacation. I saw that Justin covered that one fairly well. The TikTok ban became the Restrict Act. I still want to cover that and have a lot of things to say about both of those subjects. So I'm actually going to start my discussion today on the news about that shooting and the call by some conservatives to restrict firearms to transgender people because of the whole mental health question. But it's going to be a perfect segue later on in our program when I have Christina Buttons on the program today to discuss at 8:30 a.m. Central to talk about the difference between gender ideology and gender dysphoria. And I find this fascinating, a fascinating discussion, especially in light of the fact that she actually had been working for Ben Shapiro's outlet, The Daily Wire, for a short time. She actually moved to Nashville to go work for Ben Shapiro's outfit, and she quit about a month ago because she was actually sickened by the rhetoric that was coming out of Matt Walsh and others. And so what I had seen from her public statement about why she quit the Daily Wire, I thought was fascinating and was worthy to share with you. Of course, we're a libertarian audience here, and I think that that will probably resonate with you. So I look forward to having Christina Buttons on the show later today at 8:30 a.m. today. We got great guests as usual. But when I saw all the news, I have to say, it was quite depressing to see everything that was going on back in the States. And while I did mostly try and ignore what was happening back in the United States, it's almost impossible to do when you're on a vacation, even when you're on the other side of the planet, when there's a shooting of that magnitude that captures the national consciousness. And when there's a massive push for control over the internet that came through the Restrict Act, these are the kind of things that you see and you pay attention to. And it really just made me shake my head. I mean, I just looked back at America and I honestly was very ashamed. And
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to excuse me.
Yeah, America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I have to say, I was pretty ashamed of my country when I was over there looking back and seeing what was going on and seeing what was happening in the news and saying to myself, this is the it was disgusting. And it's something that I'm going to discuss a little bit more here in just a few minutes. At 7:30 this morning, I want to talk in a little bit more detail with John Miltimore, the managing editor of the Foundation for Economic Education, about the Restrict Act, and just to try and understand how the TikTok ban went from a push to ban TikTok, of which many people were supporting, to the Restrict Act, which a lot of people didn't support. And honestly, not to say too much I told you so, but I just was really annoyed in the weeks leading up to my vacation from the people on the right, mostly on the MAGA Trumper right, of the people who are big Josh Hawley supporters who are saying, "Oh yes, we need to ban TikTok," and all of these people who were in the comment section saying, "Oh, don't be a libertarian. We need to ban TikTok. It's because China." Blah 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 blah. The people who are so triggered by China. And then I saw the how the TikTok ban had morphed and evolved into the Restrict Act, and I just said to myself, I knew that this is exactly what was going to happen. The people are so stinking naive when they believe that their government is actually going to do something that is in their own best interest. The only time that the government actually does something that's in the best interest of the people is when it just so happens to actually be in the best interest of the politicians who control the government. It's extremely naive for people who believed that the government was going to ban TikTok and do something like that to protect American interests or American national security. If the right people palms aren't getting greased here in the United States, then they're not going to do the right thing. They're not going to get anything done, of course. Um, I don't even know any big Holly supporters. Well, there's a lot of people who do support him. It's true, and it's something that we are going to discuss here in just a few minutes. But I did enjoy the back and forth between Senators Hawley and Paul, and I've got the clips of that, and we're going to play that. Quest Fanning, thanks for the super chat this morning. Yeah, if you're happy to see that the Wake Up America show is back today, drop a super chat like Quest Fanning today. Angela McArdle and John Miltimore among my favorite longtime Twitter mutuals. Looking forward to those segments. Yes, we'll have John Miltimore here in just about 20 minutes, and we'll talk to him about the battle over the TikTok ban. A man got called out for suggesting that he had a work wife. Have you ever had this something like this in your workplace, where you have someone that's like a male or a female that is someone who you kind of think of as like your work wife or your work husband, and it's not a romantic relationship at all. That's not what work wife or work husband is. But when I worked at Fox for a little while, I had what might call a work wife, and it was a girl who we were very close and we got a lot of things done together, and we always had a really good flow and we worked well together. She called me her work husband. I was her work husband, she was my work wife, and we got along really well. Well, a man got in big trouble for referring to a woman as his work wife at his office. But I will say that it's probably a mistake to refer to a woman as your work wife if she hasn't already referred to you as her work husband. Anyways, we'll talk about that in more detail at 7:51. At 8 o'clock, we'll talk to Angela McArdle. Is it time for a national divorce? She wrote a piece in Reason magazine that was on the front page yesterday, where she says that political breakups are really as American as apple pie. And she was in the affirmative, arguing that a national divorce is an opportunity for peaceful coexistence. Zach Weissmuller said that ideological differences don't necessitate divorce. So we'll talk to Angela McArdle about that at 8 o'clock this morning about a national divorce. I'd be curious to hear what you have to say about it. Do you think that the United States needs to undergo a national divorce? Send us a text 573-319-1586. That's 573-319-1586. We'd love to hear from you on the show. today on your thoughts on the concept of a national divorce. Is secession the way to go? Our secession holiday is coming up. The 4th of July is coming up. I'm super excited about it. I know some people are not super excited about it because they're going to be getting a lot of advertising from the apforlibertyshop.com website. Have you been seeing all the hate that I've been getting from people for the merchandise from the AP for Liberty shop? They're like, I liked it better when you just posted inspirational things on Facebook and TikTok. I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't pay the bills. You get a lot of hate from people whenever you engage in commerce. People hate salesmen. And I get it. I understand why, it can be quite annoying seeing advertising and things like that. But frankly, at the end of the day, you don't pay my bills. I can't worry about you, right? But if you're somebody who comes in and spends a lot of money at AP for Liberty Shop and you're like, I'm annoyed by the ads, I'm like, okay, well, I might listen to somebody like that. But quite frankly, you got to tune out the haters in this life because no matter what you do, people throw rocks at things that are shiny, says Taylor Swift, right? Am I right? Excuse me. Excuse me on that. You can, again, text the show. Tell us what you think about a national divorce at 573-319-1586. Kermode Bear says we wouldn't need a national divorce if people weren't so obsessed with using the federal government to force their moral will on others. Well, I give you an amen to that one. People want to also use their state governments to tread on the freedoms of others. People just love to use government in general to tread on the freedoms of others, and it's a damn shame. Rare Camellia says that the LP is obsessed with national divorce, and the redhead libertarian obsessed with the 19th Amendment. The simps love it. Well, the simps are gonna love it because the simps are horny and they want to, the redheaded libertarian girl, and they're never gonna get it, never gonna get this, never gonna get this. Ah, la 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 la. Looks like the internet is typical when we're back from vacation. We can't expect things to just work perfectly, can we? Can we? No, we can't.
God! No, God, please, no! No! No!
Okay, so I've already introduced, we were going to have Christina Buttons. And if I have time at the end of the show, the Super Mario Brothers movie blasted off. Yeah, biggest opening weekend of 2023. Super Mario Brothers movie had a blockbuster opening weekend, racking up 146 million bucks over 3 days and stomping the competition. Haha, stomping like that. Good Mario reference there. At the domestic box office, according to studio estimates on Sunday. Wow, big, huge animated movie. And honestly, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of want to go see the Super Mario Brothers movie. What about you? Are you gonna go see the Super Mario Brothers movie? Some people are like, oh, it's a kid movie. But you know what? I just spent 2 weeks in Japan where Super Mario was born, and I played a nice little Super Mario game while I was there. And I'm a Super Mario fan. What can I say? Text the show today your thoughts on a national divorce at 573-319-1586. That's 573-319-1586. All right, so I'm going to give you my thoughts on that school shooting that happened while I was gone at that Christian school. I'm going to say this. While it is an absolute tragedy and it is a sign that that person did have some form of mental illness, whether or not that was connected to a gender dysphoria that they may or may not have had, we don't know. But I'll say that I still hold to my opinion that we should not allow the government to institute things like red flag laws or any kind of legislation that would try and disarm people on the basis of being mentally ill. Because while as good intentioned as it may sound, as reasonable as legislation like that may sound, it will eventually be used against people for their political beliefs, which will be labeled as mental illness. I think it's quite reasonable to believe that many people who are members of Antifa or members who are communists are mentally ill themselves. And I know it's quite fashionable in right wing circles now to suggest that leftists and people who are not conservatives, who are not defenders of the Second Amendment, should themselves be disarmed. And I disagree with that as well. But on the question of transgenders and mental illness, the problem, of course, is that not everyone who considers themselves to be transgender is suffering from gender dysphoria. Many of them are suffering from the social contagion, and that social contagion is a result of what has been spoon-fed to many of these young people through academia, which is why I'm really excited for Christina Buttons' interview coming up at 8:30 a.m. today. You do not want to miss it because she will explain to us the difference between gender dysphoria and gender ideology. Of course, the difference between gender ideology and gender dysphoria might be one that's very clear for most of our regular listeners to the Wake Up America show, but I think it absolutely bears repeating. and it's something that we need to discuss in a little bit more detail. Some people are not suffering from actual mental illness who identify as transgender. And I did see that there was a clip where conservative Ben Shapiro suggested that we might disarm people who are transgender because they're suffering from mental illness. Now, it's possible that Ben Shapiro was saying that in an ironic form, meaning that it was supposed to be sort of a satire or a parody of what the left has advocated when the left has advocated for disarming people who have mental illness in the past or who have advocated for red flag laws. I think Dan Crenshaw and many Republicans also believe in things like red flag laws. I think Senator Hawley's actually backed red flag laws at certain points in time. I know that he did back the bump stock ban. But in regards to mental illness, there's plenty of mental illness in the political community. There's plenty of mental illness to go around in terms of what you might just consider your garden variety depression that some people suffer from. Should those people be disarmed? I think that the problem goes a little bit deeper. But the question is do we sacrifice our liberty for a sense of security? And I stand with the libertarians that we should not. In regards to the second question about the Restrict Act, how did we get here? I have a clip of Senator Josh Hawley and Rand Paul in the Senate. This happened before, or like right as I was heading to Japan. So I apologize for the delay in my discussion on this one. But you know what? I didn't get a chance to talk about it, and I want to talk about it. I'd like to respond to these clips. Take a listen.
Senator from Missouri.
Madam President, let me just finish with this, that the Senator from Kentucky decried the collection of personal data by American social media companies, and he's right to do that, by the way. I'm concerned about that too, no doubt. But he pointed out that many American social media companies collect all of this information, that they do it without the user's consent. Sometimes they sell it to third parties for a profit, and you can't necessarily opt out of it. All fair enough, but he is protecting exactly what he decries. The difference is with TikTok, that information is going to a hostile foreign government. It's not a market, it's total control. So I would just say this to Americans out there who are using TikTok. Just know this, we need to tell you the truth about this app. Just know this, if you have it on your phone, it is tracking your keystrokes, it is tracking your movements, it is tracking your location, and it is sending that information, whether you want it sent.
Dude, do you think people who, no, I mean, not to be an asshole or anything, but do you think people who use TikTok are listening to congressional debates? I mean, for the love of God.
Or not, to Beijing, to the Communist Chinese Party, where it can be accessed by anybody there who wants it under China's national security laws. That is a threat to your personal security, and that is why we should act to ban it. Let me just finally ask Senator from Kentucky, he and I talked about this before, would the senator consider allowing us to set a roll call vote, an up or down roll call vote, not unanimous consent to pass, but to set a roll call vote at a time certain? Would the senator consent to that?
Madam President.
Senator from Kentucky.
Dude, this is epic. This is epic. I mean, God, don't you wish Rand Paul was our senator? But continue.
Reserving the right to object. I'm unlikely to take First Amendment advice from someone who believes that the First Amendment doesn't protect the Communist Party. You'll find no greater foe of communism, no greater critic. I've been a long-standing critic of, really the funding of research in Wuhan that led to the virus. And yet I still want to protect the basic Bill of Rights, the First Amendment that protects his speech, whether we like it or not.
God bless
if someone
you,
doesn't
Rand.
understand that communism actually is included under the First Amendment, that terrible speech that we object to is included under that, this is something we should be very wary of.
Yes.
We should beware of people who peddle fear. We should beware of people who peddle half-truths.
Amen.
Almost everything that's been said about collecting data is in all likelihood true. All the social media companies collect data. They devise algorithms. Some of the domestic ones have psychological experiments that might horrify you to see what they've got all the young kids thinking and doing and trying to get them to click on different pictures or trying to get them. This is a marketing stratagem, and they all do it. And they all want to make money, and they all want to get clicks. The difference is this. Many people on the right, in fact, some on the left, they are horrified by big tech in our country. They're consistent in being horrified by the abuses of big tech here and also TikTok. But look at their legislative proposals. Many of them would actually ban big tech here as well, or put it under the thumb of government or set up government agencies or panels to determine what speech would be acceptable. And if you're not putting enough conservatives on there, by golly, we're going to have a government commission that's going to determine what kind of content gets on there. These are scary ideas. Don't succumb to fear. Don't give up our freedoms. Don't say that, oh my goodness, we're going to ban 150 million Americans. This isn't just about the company.
See, Camellia, give him an applause there. Camellia had said that she still had not heard this clip before now. Rand Paul is the president we need but don't deserve. Very true, very true. I'm glad there that I'm back on the Freedom Watch here in the morning so that I can share these kinds of clips with you, Camellia. I appreciate you joining us here today on the show. Sorry, we're not going to be able to have her for our regular Tuesday segment. She's busy, but Camellia will be joining us this coming Thursday. Senator Rand Paul is absolutely correct. We have to defend the speech of even the people that we despise. That is the point of the Bill of Rights. And it's amazing how far the right has slipped into totalitarianism, especially just in the last few years, as a reaction to the authoritarianism of the left. It's quite concerning to me to see that the right has abandoned the Tea Party foundations that united a broad segment of the American people, resulted in a tidal wave of elections, in the elections of people like Rand Paul and Thomas Massie and Justin Amash and many other Ted Cruz and many others who agree with us about limiting the intrusion of government into our lives. But after that, unfortunately, it seems that the party has really lost its way. But how did this happen? How did the ban on TikTok become the Restrict Act? I'm looking forward to talking to John Miltimore about that one and getting a little bit more information about this because, Senator Hawley, I think, very naively has tried to advance what is just a simple up or down vote on a ban of TikTok in the hopes that the Congress was going to just simply ban a Chinese app. But the reality is that actually the majority of the owners of the people who own this app are not in China. As a matter of fact, the people who developed it and created it were Chinese, but the majority owners are people who actually reside in the United States. And the company is actually headquartered in the Caymans, not in China. Something to think about, but since when do facts care about people's feelings? Good morning to Joni Rankin. Good morning, Kermode Bear, Brian Lewis. Nice to see you all here today. Glad to have you all here on the show. I'm going to go get my buddy, John Miltimore, and we're going to talk to him a little bit more about how the Restrict Act came to be after it was started as a TikTok ban, moved on to the Restrict Act. We'll talk about all that when I get back on the Wake Up America Show, wakeupAmericaShow.com. We're back, baby.
I like shooting things, but whenever I can't shoot something, I like to cut things. My life isn't all about shooting and stabbing and cutting, though. Sometimes I have to do actual work, but when I work, I still like to have fun. And there's nothing less fun than trying to cut with a crappy knife. Thankfully, from the ancient sect of Christian knights, who also loved cutting and stabbing, comes a new implement that has received my personal blessing, the Templar knife. Like the ancient sword of Excalibur, you don't choose a Templar knife, it chooses you. You just decide what kind you want on the website first, however, and then order it online, and then it chooses you. The Templar knife comes in a variety of shapes shapes. As a man of culture and taste, I have decided I will never use a terrible knife again. And thanks to the inspiration provided by this excellent product, I have decided to launch a new crusade against anyone using less than superior knives. Join me, brothers and sisters, by visiting uppercuttactical.com/pages/Templar-knives. That's a lot of slashes. For that, you'll need a Templar knife. For 10% off, use code AP for Liberty and join me in a quest for glory, for liberty, for Christendom, for the Templar knife. Get yours today. Fire.
Hello, this is Barack Obama, and let me tell you why Austin Peterson stinks, and you should never pay attention to anything that he has to say. First of all, he's a libertarian, and we all know libertarians are idiots. They don't realize how important government is to everything that we do. I recently became aware that Austin has opened up a libertarian shop at apeforlibertyshop.com. Now, I'm asking you as a personal favor to me that you never ever visit apeforlibertyshop.com. With all of the great Liberty merchandise there, the last thing that we need to do is to get people spreading this message around the country, because then they might start thinking that they don't need government. And that's the last thing that good Democrats like us want. So if you love democracy, like me, and hate freedom, then don't visit AP for Liberty Shop. Like I said, whatever you do, do not visit aporlibertyshop.com. I'm Barack Obama, and I approve this message.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move, so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice.
It is better to settle these matters in the courts than on the streets, and new laws are needed at every level. But law alone cannot make men see right.
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show. Happy Monday. Hope you're doing well. Everybody feeling happy? I guess so. Wow. Nice response from the studio audience. Glad to have you here, and all of the numerous amounts of people watching this online. Nice numbers today. Thanks so much for tuning in. If it's your first time here today, make sure that you like, subscribe, hit that bell notification icon so that you can get notifications whenever we're going live. If you like the content that you hear today and you're still a little skeptical, you're like, I don't know if I want to hear more from them, stick around, listen to my next guest. He's the managing editor of the Foundation for Economic Education. He's John Miltimore. You don't want to mess with him because he's got a friggin' samurai sword behind his head. What's that for, John?
It was one of those, we discussed this when we were talking Austin's trip to Japan. I bought it at a Renaissance festival a few years ago. I like swords ever since I was a kid. I like it. So I got a battle axe. I got a sword. I got like a pirates little. It's not a rapier, but it's something like that. So I got a few weapons in my office hanging around.
I was telling John the story of how I almost bought a Japanese sword from World War II while I was there in Kyoto. And apparently negotiations and haggling is not a thing in Japan, because when a lady told me how much it cost, I offered her a little bit of a lower price and she kicked us out of her sword shop. Okay, so that didn't work out. It saved me money though. Anyways, John, we're glad to have you on the program today. Welcome back to the show. I'm excited to talk to you today a little bit about this story because I didn't get a chance to discuss it during the break. The TikTok ban started out as something Senator Josh Hawley's been advancing. Let's go out there and protect youngsters from dance videos and from, probably a lot of things that maybe they shouldn't see. But one, is that the government's job? And two, the bigger question is, how did it go from a ban of TikTok to this Restrict Act? Give us a little bit of background here.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first thing. Don't call this a TikTok ban. It goes, much beyond that. We're talking, VPNs more broadly, that they can do whatever they want to with it, and that's a problem. The language here, you lawmakers themselves clearly don't really know what this act does. Reporters really don't either. You can see everybody trying to make sense of it. I spent about 45 minutes this morning before I called just trying to, find out what's in the bill, see who supports it. You see all this language from Republicans that say, well, even TikTok supports this bill because they're trying to claim it. Well, that's not true either, because TikTok came out and laughed, so that's simply not true. But your bigger question is the important one: is this the job of the federal government? And the answer is no. We saw this in 2020 when Donald Trump was trying to do it as well. And I look back. I was going to try to find some examples of hypocrisy of media, calling it Trump's crazy TikTok ban. And even then, there was this sense that, well, Trump didn't get that ripped for this, which is kind of surprising. I thought, Trump got torched for everything in 2020. This, I think there's a broad consensus among people that TikTok is dangerous, that the government needs to protect us. And I don't think it's all. If you look, the Biden campaign made their staffers delete TikTok, right? So I think there is some genuine fear over what TikTok can do. What do we, how serious, how should we take those concerns? I'm not going to tell people not to take it seriously. I don't know enough. I know my daughter still uses it, and I don't take it seriously enough to say, no, you can't ever use TikTok. We try to moderate that because, kids are on it all the time. But, there's a great Thomas Sowell quote, I think, applies to this. And it's the idea, he says, of what's best. He says, that's not the right question. The question is who gets to choose. Most of us don't know in a given situation how serious something is. But we get to choose the product. And that's what we live in this culture today where government just wants to ban everything, whether it's your AR-15 or your Skittles that you eat, or your hamburger that you think, oh, you shouldn't have that. We should have a plant-based burger. All these things the government's trying to decide for us. That's not the way it works, at least not in a free country.
What I think is fascinating is that it started out as this push to ban TikTok, and I see people all over my feed and stream and on Instagram and places like that saying, "Yes, ban TikTok. Oh, it's terrible for our kids. It's absolutely a danger to society. Just China is our enemy." And then a lot of those same people, when they saw the Restrict Act, were like, "No, no, 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 no. This isn't what we wanted. No, 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 no. This is terrible. We don't want to have anything to do with this." But it's kind of like, how could you be so naive to think that wasn't exactly what they were going to turn it into? Some monstrous, nightmarish Frankenstein's monster of a bill. I mean, it's like every generation, John, has to learn these lessons. I don't understand why knowledge can't seem to stick around and hang around about this kind of stuff. It's like every new generation we have to educate about this stuff.
Yeah, you're right about that. And the truth is they're not going to know if they're not taught it, right? I recently had a conversation with a German author, Rainier Zittelman. He just wrote a book in defensive capitalism. We talked for about an hour about some of these things, and why, he goes around campuses all over the world and asks, like, one of the questions he asks is if you've ever heard of the Great Leap Forward. And no one, it doesn't matter if you're in the UK or if you're in France or America or Chile. Kids don't know that they're not being taught any of this, which is why we see all of this sort of collectivism coming back. I think there is an incentive not to teach this stuff, right? Especially when you do have governments that are largely in charge of the universities and the schools. Some of these ideas aren't real comfortable with them. So we shouldn't be surprised that we have to relearn lessons when we're never taught them in the first place. But there is something more sinister about this. You even said something, our children, right? Like this is why people say, this is what it's doing to our children. Well, you should worry about your children. Those are the children that are yours. And if you see this as a threat, make sure they don't have it. And don't let them use it. And you got to let other people decide what their kids are going to do. And when you say our children, that's who you should mean. You shouldn't mean American children. You should mean your children. And parents do have a responsibility to try to, keep your kids off these devices, to some extent. And yeah, maybe find out what's actually, how dangerous is TikTok. My hunch is TikTok is not much more dangerous than half the other apps, kids are using. And the Chinese government is probably not even as good at harvesting that data as our government is with, if you really want to talk about some of the dangers, look at what the US government has been doing with Facebook and Twitter the last few years. We have enough stuff to worry about over here without, trying to regulate China's apps.
If you're just tuning into the Wake Up America show, I'm your host, Austin Peterson. I'm speaking to John Miltimore. He's the managing editor of the Foundation for Economic Education. I see some of our commenters today are asking if the show is live or pre-recorded. We are live, and today is Monday, the 10th of April, 7:36 a.m. So if you're watching us right now, then you are watching us live at that time, 7:36 in the morning, Central Time, that is. John, so the Restrict Act, what it really does is it seems to put together a bunch of demands or a bunch of like wish lists or gimmies that a lot of people in power have wanted for quite some time. I thought it was hilarious. You probably didn't see this, but I think Senator Lindsey Graham appeared on the Jesse Waters show to talk about this, and Jesse Waters asked him asked him if he read the bill. And Lindsey Graham couldn't answer him on that one. He thought, well, why is it if you haven't read the bill, why are you a co-sponsor of it? Apparently, Lindsey Graham didn't even know that he was a co-sponsor of it. Our friend Elizabeth Fanning Press over there says, why do we allow bills with pork, bills that no one can possibly read? I mean, if the Republic is dying, John, it's because we're passing bills, and legislators are passing bills that they're not even reading. How can we let them get away with this?
I actually did see that clip, and I was laughing out loud watching it. And you could tell even Lindsey Graham was embarrassed about it. Like he had egg on his face and he knew it. But that's not the exception. You're absolutely right. That's the norm. You have lawmakers themselves. They don't know what's in this legislation. Everything is too big. Nobody has time to read everything. You have even lawmakers themselves now, like when they wheel out the massive omnibus bill, right? None of them, it's a joke. None of them have seen it. They wheel it out on a big cart. A few in leadership have been the people that have been cobbling that bill together, are the only people that really know what's in it. I don't think people realize how dysfunctional things are. Like even you go back 10 years, we used to still have kind of committee bills, right? Like different committees would put forth bills. Like we stopped budgeting for all of that stuff. Now we just kind of roll out the big omnibus bill at the end that we know is going to have $1.5 trillion deficit that year. It's a total mess. I don't know how it gets better. I guess I got to stick around for your next conversation on the national divorce, which is a more interesting conversation than the restrict bill. Even it's one of those things I find myself thinking about it. Like how do we fix this? Like is people like how do we save this? And more, I don't think it can be saved. I think you just have special interests in Washington that have too much power and too much control, and even some sensible solutions. I don't see them going anywhere. And I see a lot of people like, oh, we need to return to federalism. Like, well, yeah, I've been saying that since I was like 10 years old, I don't see how we magically just pivot back to federalism. So these are serious problems for an aging republic where the people are kind of out of touch. And as long as there are bread and circuses, people don't care, to mind very much.
I just got back from Japan, and they are an ancient culture, an ancient civilization. They had periods of time Ironically, their isolationist period was like their most prosperous period, right? Which leads one to wonder about the questions of international trade and economy. But in regards to the how the comparison of the United States as a fading republic, what was it? What was it that really brought us down then? Was it just too much democracy? Was it too much people people voting themselves the public treasury like became a public trough in such a sense? I mean, what was the downfall of the republic then in your mind?
Oh, I think it starts, in about 1914, and World War One occurred, and we weren't involved in that war, or even a year earlier. When you look at everything under Wilson, you can point. We got the income tax, we got the Federal Reserve, we got involved in one of these bloody European wars that caused a lot of problems. Some of the problems were rolled back under Wilson. Like we debate who is worse, FDR or Wilson. I still say Wilson, but some say, to me, FDR, because a lot of the FDR's programs still exist, unlike a lot of Wilson's programs. But he did bring us, the Federal Reserve and the income tax. To me, that's enough. And a lot of that laid the groundwork for federal control. That was, you never could have a single government trying to regulate a country as broad and diverse as the United States of America. That was part of the reason it was built in this fractured way. And now we have, kind of like a monoculture, like a strange ideology coming out of Washington, D.C. that wants everybody to believe this set of values, even when it's changing our values in a lot of ways, right? And I think we lost that lesson. Government is not supposed to institute your values. I don't care what those values are. That's not the role of government. But yeah, it's a mess now. We're a fracturing culture in a lot of ways. But I think there is light at the end of the tunnel. Like, if you do believe that the way America was supposed to exist was in this way of, a limited federal government with state governments that had their own powers. We shouldn't, look at this and say, oh, we need to keep it all together through, a power in Washington, D.C. I think that's going to end badly no matter who's running the show, whether it be Republicans or Democrats or anyone else. Yeah, like I just think we're in for, Rome didn't fall in a day. We're not going to either. It's going to be kind of a lot of chaotic years. We see it now. We're projected to have $50 trillion in debt here by. I saw Yellen made that point. You were in Japan having fun, but they asked her point blank, and she said, "Well, yes, as long as that is fiscally sustainable." And like the debt we're piling on is not sustainable. The politics now is not sustainable. Everybody's just at each other's throats. There's just too much at stake in elections. This government's not working for anyone.
Yeah, I guess my thing is that what I think was really the downfall of the Republic is when the Republican Party was infected with progressivism, through Theodore Roosevelt, and we no longer had an opposition party, because it used to be that the Republican Party was an opposition party to the Democrats. But now that progressivism has infected the Republican Party, it's mainstream ideology. And most people, if you ask people what progressivism is, they think it means things like gay rights or some social issues, things like that. But progressivism defined really just means that you believe it is the job of the government to transform society. And what you were talking about is government impressing its values upon people. Both Republicans and Democrats, mainstream Republicans and Democrats, are progressives, and that they believe that it is the job of the government to transform society, and to use things like tax laws, for example, like Marco Rubio style tax laws to reward families, or like Mitt Romney's, paid family leave act and things like that. Like, that is a progressive ideology in play, because it sounds good, right? It sounds like a great idea. Let's just use the government to help support families. We need more families. We need to have more kids. We need to grow our population. So the government should support that through tax law. But that is the progressivism, right? I mean, that is what we call social engineering, is it not?
No, 100%. And you're right that it really was born more prominently in the Republican Party under TR. And there's an interesting historical note to that. Like Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt's ideas were controversial in his own party. he wasn't going to win the Republican nomination, of course. So he runs third party. And, so both him and Taft lose in the election. And that's how we get Woodrow Wilson, who was, more dangerous than any, president in early American history. Wilson had all kinds of bad ideas and was a truly awful president. If you look at some of his civil rights abuses, as well, like we tend to remember, FDR's, interning Japanese Americans in camps. We forget about some of the things, Wilson did about just the Palmer Acts and just throwing civilians into prison, his attorney general running around rounding up thousands of people and putting them in prison for their political beliefs. They were socialists, so most Americans didn't care. That's why we forget it. But yeah, like you go back. I think it is early American progressivism where we went wrong. And both sides tend to agree with these things depending on how government's using its power. Nobody today, though, there's just not enough Americans that can have the principles to say no, government shouldn't be doing this at all. Those are not politically popular opinions. And so, this is why you see, parties today, they're not going to say these things. And if banning TikTok is popular, you're going to have people running to do it, but it is strange. I do wonder, like, even if the Democrats right now are really, both sides are pushing this bill, but I'm not sure Biden fully understands the political consequences for this, because you do have young people that love TikTok. And it is a good way to really piss off a lot of young, Gen Z users. So maybe this backfires. Maybe it leads to some sort of like populist revolt against, DC trying to control our apps in this way, but I guess I'm doubtful of that.
Hold our breath on that one. So on the question of national divorce, you were jealous that I'm talking to Angela McArdle about that here in about 15 minutes, but I'll give you the last word on this, John. Where do you stand on the question of national divorce?
I really have no official position. I'm one of these people thinking it through. And I will say this is where I am. I don't see, I think it's inevitable, I guess is what I'll say. Like how I feel about it doesn't even really matter. I think it's only a matter of time before this becomes a much more salient issue than it is right now. I'm reading a good book called Break It Up right now. The author's a progressive who said, looks at just the history. Americans have been doing this since we've been around, right? Even before the country was founded, like there was this movement to break it up, even though we really weren't, a country yet. The only time that stopped was during this 20th century, right? When everything started, and there were some things even there you can find, but everything consolidated. And that's what was happening for much of the 20th century. Well, then as that century came to a close, if you look around, everything is kind of breaking up. It's not just in the United States. You can find lots of examples around the world. So I do kind of think it's inevitable. That's scary to me. I grew up, loving your country, like most Americans, you're proud of your country and all these things. And then you kind of realize, we've been involved. We've been the bad guy through a lot of this stuff too. The closer you look at history, and then you see all the things, the tension in the world today. And I just kind of think it's inevitable. I hope it happens in a peaceful way. I hope we remember that people do remember we have the right to revolt, right? And if this is done peacefully, this doesn't have to be a disaster. But I also my final point. I am the mind. This is not going to be a 5-year process. This is going to be something we're talking about. When my kids are my age, this is going to be still going on, I think.
Yeah, no kidding. It's a difficult question, but it's one we're going to get into more detail with our friend Angela McArdle, who'll join us here in about 10 minutes. But why don't we all say thank you, give a big round of applause to our friend John Miltimore, managing editor of the Foundation for Economic Education. Brother, thank you very much for your time today.
Hey, great seeing you again, AP. You take care.
Yep, we'll talk again very soon. That's John Miltimore. What do you think? Send us a text, 573-319-1586. All right, have you ever had a work wife, or maybe you've had a work husband? Did you call him that in the workplace? Well, if you're a man, you better not refer to a lady as your work wife, or you'll end up like the next guy. We'll talk about that story before we get to Angela McArdle when we get back on the Wake Up America Show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
Want an engaging website to boost your business? You're just a click away from 5-star Fiverr talent. Hundreds of freelancer skills like web design. Head to Fiverr.com today and get something started.
American conservatism is distinct, like America is distinct from the United Kingdom. American conservatism's roots comes out of the Wild West, out of pioneerism. The difference between American conservatives and European conservatives is that Americans are cowboys. We are that God, guns, gold, and girls. It's wild here, and we should stay that way. We shouldn't allow a European version of conservatism to come and infect us here. We like it wide open spaces here, deep in the heart of Texas and all that.
Hey there, it's your favorite Vice President Joe Biden. I wanted to talk to you today about the Wake Up America show, the best source for all your political news and commentary. But before I get started, let me just make sure I have all my notes in order. Okay, where was I? All right, the Wake Up America show. It's a great way to stay informed and make your voice heard. Boy, what was I saying again? Oh, right. The Wake Up America show. It's important that we all stay engaged and knowledgeable about what's going on in our country and, the thing. But hold on, where was I going with all this? Oh, yeah. The Wake Up America show. It's a fantastic resource. And if you really want to make a difference, man, you can sign up to be a monthly donor at wakeupamerica.com/support. Now, where was I? Oh, that's right, the Wake Up America show. So if you want to stay woke and support a great cause, head on over to wakeupamerica.com/support and sign up to be a monthly donor today. And if you're feeling generous, you can even give a donation in my name. Thanks for listening, and keep on keeping on, America. Come on, man.
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show at wakeupamerica.com. Happy Monday. Today is the 10th of April. It's 7:52 a.m. Central Time in the morning if you're watching and listening to us live. If you're listening to us later on the podcast, well, you should definitely join us on the live stream every Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Central Time. It's a great 2-hour talk show. And if it's your first time watching us live today, make sure you click that like button and subscribe so that you'll get notifications whenever we are live. You can join us and the Cantina crew over on YouTube, on Rumble, Facebook, or Twitch, and even a few people like to join and watch us on Twitter so that you can see the Wake Up America show Mondays through Fridays. Glad to see Anna Bananarama here. Mary Kramer, nice to see you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Todd Starkey is here alongside our friend Doug H. and Maria Krabs. Maria Krabs. I don't think that's your real last name. No, I don't think it is at all.
God! No,
How is America
God,
doing
please,
today?
No!
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to excuse me.
That's about what America can be defined as, wouldn't you say? New York Post article advice columnist offered advice to a man who asked if it was okay to refer to his colleague as a work wife. Writing into the New York Post, he says, "I referred to my colleague as my work wife, and the person got offended." Of course they did. You as a man said something to a woman, and it wasn't something other than, "How can I please you, mistress? How can I serve you, mistress?" I meant it in a complimentary way, but got reprimanded by HR. Yeah, you dumb idiot. What are you? Of course, you cannot speak to women in the workplace. I highly recommend to every man that they do not, unless they are absolutely required to, never, ever speak to women in the workplace. He says, "I can't take this hypersensitivity. Can I get in trouble for not speaking at work? Only answering direct questions." I mean, for the love of God, dude, what did you think was going to happen? Now, the advice columnist wrote back and said this, not to open a different can of worms, but you don't say if the colleague you referred to as your work wife was a man or a woman. That's hilarious. Very funny. Good morning, Terry Miller. Nice to see you. He says, not that a woman couldn't be offended, but it's not uncommon to refer to a colleague of the opposite sex with whom one has a close working relationship as a work wife or a work husband. I've had a work wife before, and again, it has no sexual connotations or no intimate connotations at all. It's just that it's somebody that you're really close with at work that you work very well with, and that you guys like have a good flow and a good, healthy working relationship, and you just happen to like to team up for projects or what have you. Work wife or work husband, that's what that means. So this guy apparently referred to a woman or a man. Who knows? Maybe it was a man, or maybe it was a man who identifies as a woman, or a woman who identifies as a man. The problem is that you referred to someone with a gendered term, wife implying female. And, you know, if there's one thing that we've learned these days is that women don't like to be referred to as women, and men don't like to be referred to as men. And you just pretty much can't refer to anybody in any gender capacity. You can't refer to anyone. What is that quote from Michael Scott where he says, he says, never do anything ever. Michael Scott, never do anything ever. What is this quote? God, it's so good. Hold on, I'm going to find it. Here it is. Don't ever, for any reason, do anything to anyone, for any reason ever, no matter what, no matter where or who you're with, or where you're going, or where you've been, ever, for any reason whatsoever. There you go. Don't ever do anything ever. Don't look at a woman. Don't talk to a woman. Don't refer to a woman. Don't speak to a woman in your workplace. It's a big mistake. And don't ever, for any reason, do anything to anyone for any reason ever, no matter what, no matter where. It's a big mistake. And it sounds like I'm joking, but I'm kind of not. That's the habit that I got into with my previous jobs that I've had over the last maybe 5-6 years, when I actually was like working for someone else, which was pretty rare. But when I did, I pretty much just avoided all women in the workplace. Guys I would sometimes talk to, but I didn't volunteer for like social gatherings or things like that. And I always recommend that, my advice has been, and a lot of HR people recommend this as well, don't think of people at your office as your friends, because they're not your friends. The colleague got upset, reported the guy to HR for referring to her as his work wife. You made a mistake, buddy. You don't refer to women, okay? Don't talk to them. Don't look at them. Don't speak to them. Don't interact with them. Unless they're your boss that are asking you a question, then you can respond to them, report back to them. But I know it sounds funny, but it's really not a joke, right? I was at the Osaka Castle waiting in line. I was talking to my favorite comedian, Eddie Izzard, and these two California ladies were in front of us, and they kept correcting me about his gender because he apparently 6 weeks ago decided to become a woman, and now is no longer Eddie. And I kept saying his because I've known Eddie Izzard as Eddie his whole life, and now she's like her, correcting me. He's like, shut up, bitch. I will refer to them however I please. If I deign to refer to her as a her, I will do so. I don't need you correcting me. Thank you very much. Please, F off. Anyways, it's time for me to go get a woman. I'm going to go speak to a woman. Man, I should be taking my own advice. Angela McArdle, should we have a national divorce? She's going to make the case for why. It's time for a breakup. Oh yes, not my work wife. And it's not a real divorce. It's a national divorce. We'll talk about that when we get back on the Wake Up America Show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
Good morning to the Cantina crew. This is Elon Musk, the CEO of Twitter. And I just want to say thank you for watching the Wake Up America Show. I've decided that Austin Peterson will be the new CEO of Twitter.com, effective immediately. First thing to do, though, is I've got to go and blast off into space.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
I think that at the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than well, that's the fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that. He's a libertarian and always has been.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything.
What is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation.
Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
The conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.
What would happen if I had to pick up the phone, call 911 for one of my family members or one of my neighbors? What would I do if no one was on the other end to respond? What if there was no 911? So you can be a part of the solution.
Anybody can be a firefighter. Male, female, younger, older.
We have school teachers. We have leaders in business.
Is me, you, anyone that wants to be. There is no typical firefighter.
Do you hate the deep state? Do you reject the Antichrist in all his ways? Do you believe that aliens controlled LBJ to assassinate John F. Kennedy? Did you know that the shot can put chemicals in you that will make you more sensitive to 5G? Do you love America? Do you want more freedom? Do you like smoking hot red-headed libertarians? Then the AP for Liberty shop is for you! Check out all the awesome new merch and have a happy new year! Fight the deep state, reject the Antichrist! Visit AP for Liberty shop and get your patriotic merchandise now, or the deep state wins!
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America Show at wakeupAmericaShow.com. Well, is it time for a national divorce? A clamor of voices for people who say that the United States is not fixable. Why would we want to live in a nation of people who hate us? It's a great question. We should probably ask one of the foremost experts in freedom and secession in the United States, the chair of the National Libertarian Party. Her name is Angela McArdle, and she's joining us. I think she's joining us with a little bit of technical issues perhaps this morning, but she's here. Angela, joining us now from Texas. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you, Angela. So we've been discussing it just a little bit to kind of tease your appearance on the show. I asked John Miltimore, the managing editor of the Foundation for Economic Education, earlier about the idea of national divorce. He says he thinks it's inevitable. What do you say?
I agree. I do think it's inevitable. I would much rather embrace it in a peaceful way and plan it out than have it happen in an explosive way where we're left scrambling and in reactive mode trying to piece something together.
Is there any chance that it could be peaceful though, Angela? I've never seen a peaceful secession before in history. Even the American secession from King James required us to, well, kill a lot of redcoats.
It did, and I think that it could be peaceful. I mean, I wouldn't call the dissolution of the Soviet Union entirely peaceful, but it was pretty close, considering how huge that system was and how tyrannical and violent it was. So, I'm optimistic that we here in the United States can do a lot better than communists did in the early 90s.
For sure. So, make the case. Why do you think that the United States should break up?
We just don't share the same values anymore. I do not think that we have even the same understanding of what the Constitution is. And so it's really difficult to share a country with people who don't agree on what the purpose is, why it was founded, what the role of government is. I think especially we've seen over the last 3 years that there are places that some members of our country are willing to go and the rest of us are not. I don't ever want to lock up my fellow countrymen because they do or do not want to go through certain medical procedures. And I've found that that's not the case, living in California for so many years. People really thought that unvaccinated Americans deserved to be held down and forcibly injected with something. They thought that people should be placed on permanent house arrest or even put in jail or in prison. And I just don't know how you can come back from something that's gone that far. And with so many people who are that ideologically possessed as well.
I can't say I can't disagree with you on any of that, so I won't, Angela. I absolutely agree with you about those things. However, there are a lot of practical freedoms that we enjoy as American citizens. One of those being the right to travel amongst the many states that we would lose if the United States were to break up. Consider, I just got back from a trip to Japan, and I'll tell you, internationally, it sure did. It wasn't fun having to go through international customs whenever I, was going to and from another country. I mean, I can envision that a lot of states, if they became countries, would probably be very hostile to immigration, like most nations of the world are, and would demand, papers, please, because the stance that many of these states already have when it comes to immigration. I mean, wouldn't we lose a lot of practical freedoms, like the ability to travel between these states without being molested or asked for our papers if there is a national breakup?
Oh, I'm not convinced of that. I think that a lot of states are going to have very easy agreements on travel. Travel used to be so much easier before September 11th, 2001. Living in California, you used to be able to slide back and forth to Mexico with a driver's license. So I'm not confident that travel would be incredibly challenging. It might be to places like California that have already instituted, these little federal or state level mandates from their employees against travel to places like Florida, but you're not going to be able to win them all. And don't worry, Disney World is somewhere else, and you'll always have other theme parks and other beaches as well.
So I imagine if you're for a national divorce, that would mean that you're probably not for, if you're for secession, you're probably not for accession. So let's say if the province of Alberta, Canada, for example, which houses a lot of conservative Canadians, decided to vote that they wanted to join the United States, you wouldn't be in favor of something like that?
I'd definitely be in favor of that because those people are going to probably be more likely to help us, and vote in constitutionally sound ways. I'd also be in favor of them joining a broken up republic and deciding which way they wanted to go. I'd like to see. Canadians sometimes have different understandings of free speech and Second Amendment rights. I'd like to see where they stand on that. I think that really conservative Canadians have definitely had a wake up call over the last 10 years, especially when it comes to free speech.
One of the things that Alexander Hamilton mentioned in the Federalist Papers of why the United States should have a federal government and be a union rather than a sort of confederation was because he believed that the states would be more want to go to war with one another if they were separate republics versus if they were one unified nation. Isn't that probably the case that the states, certainly, all of our states have rivalries. Missouri hates Kansas, and every state has a border state that they don't like. And, if they were foreign countries, wouldn't those hostilities instead just be more tense and more likely to go to war?
I think a move like national divorce would take a lot of the tension out of things, actually. I don't think that people are ready to go to war with one another unless they're forced into each other's presence at this moment. I think we all need a cool down period. Another thing I'd advocate for might be a trial separation. And I think strict federalism would probably be a great way to go about that. But, ultimately what we've seen is that the Supreme Court does not have the spine to really stand up to dictators like Gavin Newsom. And I'm not confident that the presidency and the federal executive branch will always do the right thing, as we've seen Biden, could repeatedly trample on our rights over and over again.
If you're just tuning into the Wake Up America show, I'm your host, Austin Peterson. Happy Monday. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm speaking to the chair of the National Libertarian Party, Angela McArdle, about her views on the concept of a national divorce. So war is one thing, but with the dissolution of the federal government comes the dissolution of the federal constitution and all of the privileges and immunities that are guaranteed thereof. Comes the dissolution of a bicameral system, for example, the dissolution of a Supreme Court, which has been more friendly to libertarian ideals in recent years, as flawed as it may be. Angela, are you really ready to sacrifice the Bill of Rights, and with the belief that any of these states would pass the Second Amendment, even as it was in 1776, or possibly a better version of it? I mean, isn't the more likely outcome that we lose the Bill of Rights and we gain something even worse?
Oh, coming from the great state of Texas right now, I mean, we have open carry. It's so much better than it was in California, with all kinds of ridiculous restrictions on Second Amendment rights. Unfortunately, I think our Bill of Rights is so heavily eroded, it might be time to start over.
Okay. Well, I will remind you, of course, that Texas didn't do the best job when it came to COVID compared to other states like Florida or Missouri. I mean, certainly there was, the national level approach to COVID-19 was rather tyrannical, and a lot of people have criticism about both Trump's and Biden's approach to that one. But I mean, Texas themselves, I think, didn't you guys only like get concealed carry recently? I mean, you guys have been a little bit behind the times, and
Yes.
Texas is very much turning blue.
Well, the recent ban on abortion has possibly slowed that blue wave. So we'll see. It does look to me like there are states, some of the conservative states are in competition with each other, and I think competition is a really good thing. Florida definitely lifted their lockdown the earliest. I will remind everyone, though, that Ron DeSantis did keep his great state locked down for at least a couple of months. South Dakota and I believe Oklahoma actually led the charge on not locking down at all. So kudos to them. I think, though, that competition between conservative states to do better and better is a good thing, and that it's on the rise. And I think Florida might be instituting open carry soon as well.
You quoted Michael Malice in your piece in Reason here, saying that asking the question, why should two monolithic cultures with opposite worldviews continue attempting to move forward as one unit when they are ideologically moving further apart? Do you think that it really is two monolithic worldviews, though, Angela? I mean, can't we give Americans more credit for being a little bit more diverse ideologically? I, I mean, even independents far outnumber the amount of Republicans and Democrats, and the number of registered Republicans and Democrats seems to be shrinking every single year. I mean, we're a much more diverse nation ideologically than just two monoliths. Don't you agree?
I think so. I think, when it boils down to it, people are generally going to go in one direction or the other. But if people had a preference, I would probably see several small nations emerge out of a national divorce. And I'm optimistic that that could be something that happens too. And that would probably be the best case scenario. But, generally we're all forced to frame things in team red or team blue. And people do usually tend to think about it in such simplified terms.
If it were to come to a vote and come to a debate, and if it were to lead to a conflict, is an armed conflict worth the price?
I think an armed conflict is inevitable. So I almost feel like it's a question that you'd have to ask either way. And if it's going to come down to whether or not I'm going to be forcibly vaccinated subject to some sort of federal law, like yes, absolutely. If the federal government wants to take away my right to homeschool my child, if the federal government wants to, get that involved in my life or try to rewrite the Bill of Rights, as they're trying to do over and over again with the Second Amendment, it is a hill worth dying on, because they're only doing that for a few reasons, and those reasons are really sinister. Like, they really do want very intimate control of your personal life.
Makes a lot of sense. If you're just tuning into the Wake Up America show, I'm Austin Peterson. I'm speaking to the chair of the National Libertarian Party, Angela McArdle, about the national divorce. I'd like to segue to a little bit of a separate topic here, but it does involve the strength of the United States. Have you been paying attention to what's going on with the de-dollarization? Many countries have started to collude against the American dollar in an attempt to remove the petrodollar's supremacy in the world. Is this something that you're concerned about, that you're following? Are you also following the attempts by the Federal Reserve to create a digital dollar?
Yes and yes. Okay, so I am concerned about it, as any intelligent person should be. I'm very much opposed to central bank digital currencies. I worry that the two are related, right? That our status in the global economy is going to drop a little bit, and the Federal Reserve is going to snap back with a central bank digital currency, saying, "Oh, look, this is the next thing. Everybody get on board." I think it's another great reason for national divorce. Let's go ahead and be proactive about it rather than reactive. Let's set something else up. And I'm also a big proponent of Bitcoin, not all cryptocurrencies in general, but Bitcoin as a way to break the power of the Federal Reserve. I think also if we have better foreign policy, people might not be so fed up with the United States dollar, but that is what fuels, wars abroad and chaos in the Middle East. It's a complicated mess with a lot of problems all tied down to it.
One last question for you on the subject of national divorce, Angela. If the United States does break up into separate independent republics, who gets the nukes?
I guess we'll have to negotiate the terms of that in our divorce settlement. But I imagine that states holding on to the nukes are probably going to have a strong say in that.
Okay, I would say they probably would. Angela McArdle, chair of the National Libertarian Party. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners before we let you go today?
Sure. If you're interested in the Libertarian Party, you can find out more about us at lp.org, and you can check out my written debate on national divorce in Reason magazine.
There it is. Check out her written debate on national divorce at Reason magazine if you're interested in joining the Libertarian Party and fighting for a national divorce alongside Angela McArdle. Check them out at lp.org. Angela, thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate you very much. Standing up for liberty. Have a wonderful day. That was great. What did you think of Angela McArdle? Send us a text, 573-319-1586. That's 573-319-1586. We've got Christina Buttons coming up at 8:30. You don't want to miss it. But before she does, talk to us about why she left the Daily Wire. Coming up next, I've got a great story for you. A woman quit a $100,000 a year job, and you're never going to believe why. Now stick around and find out when we get back on the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
Donald Trump, and I approve this message. Believe me, Austin Peterson is the best. He's got the greatest Wake Up America show I've ever seen. Whenever I tune in the mornings and watch the live stream, let me tell you, he has got the absolute best content. I love his guests. It's just a total blast to watch, and I highly endorse and recommend the Wake Up America show. It's terrific, believe me.
Step right up, ladies and gents, to learn about the coolest president yet. He's not just any old prez, he's Calvin Coolidge, and boy oh boy is he different from the rest. He was quiet as a mouse, but don't you underestimate his power. He knew how to handle money, and he didn't waste an hour. He cut taxes, lowered debt, and balanced the budget with ease. No wonder the Roaring Twenties brought such prosperity and peace. But don't take my word for it. Grab a copy of Calvin the Coolest President and see for yourself. It's a children's book that'll make you smile and help your little ones learn about wealth. yourself. You can find it on Amazon Kindle or get your hands on a paperback at apforlibertyshop.com. So come on down and get yourself a copy of the book that's making waves all around town. You won't regret it, so get ready to be floored because Calvin Coolidge, well, folks, he really scored.
I'm a public defender.
I am a public defender.
I'm proud to be a public defender.
80% of Americans accused of a crime will get appointed a public defender.
Everybody from a speeding ticket to capital murder.
For every dollar we spend on public defenders, we spend $3 on prosecutors.
Public defenders have to do pretty much everything on their own.
Social workers, counselors.
Investigating is another piece of it.
The average public defender holds 300 cases annually.
You never feel like there's enough time.
Public defenders have health issues all the time.
A lot of people give up and say, I can't do this work anymore.
Gideon's Promise trains, mentors, and supports public defenders.
There are a lot of people who say that they would not still be public defenders, but for Gideon's Promise.
It's fueled me to continue on in this fight.
Gideon's Promise has changed the face of public defense.
People see us as troublemakers.
Good trouble only.
We don't make it easy. It should not be easy to take away someone's liberty.
Ever hear the one about the frog?
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com. How are you feeling today? Wake up, America. What is America anyway?
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word.
Yes.
I was going to excuse me.
Glad to have me back. Are you happy that Austin is back? Well, make sure you click like on the stream or join us over on rumble.com and give us a rumble. We'd love to see you over on the Rumble platform as well. We've been growing nicely over on that platform, and it's nice to see so many people have been joining us over there. Looks like 10 people watching us now. Glad to have you here. Make sure you click that like button over on Rumble as well. Jay Caledonia is over there. Nelson65 says, welcome back. Nice to see you there. Jay Caledonia says there are tensions now among states with the federal government. A national divorce may ease the tensions we now have. Did Angela make the case to you on a national divorce? What did you think about that? Love to hear your thoughts about that one. Controversial opinion. I'd rather deal with left libertarians and alt-right Trumpy libertarians, says Chris Morrill. Well, that's your view. I'd rather deal with both of them because, you know what, to be honest, I find something that I agree with in both camps, which makes me the political misfit that I am. But that's why you love me, right? We live in a post-Civil War world, and most folks think of secession as dirty and evil. Yep, that's true. Whether or not what you said is true, Quest, whether or not that's actually true or not, I'll leave it up to you to debate. We're going to speak to Christina Buttons here at 8:30 this morning about her departure from the Daily Wire and her explanation for the difference between gender dysphoria and gender ideology. Talk to her in a little bit less than 10 minutes. We're looking forward to having a discussion about that. But before we do, a woman quit her $100,000 a year job. I thought this was an interesting article. Felicia says she's not sold on returning to the office. This was from businessinsider.com. She says after getting called back 5 days a week, she's leaving her job altogether. Says she'd rather forego a six-figure salary than be in the office every day. She says, I know how to do my job. I don't need to be in an office to do my work. I just knew I didn't want to go back to what it felt like before. She's a 53-year-old administrator in Arizona. And a lot of firms that have been tightening their belts have been calling their employees back into the office. The era of fully remote work may be ending. Bureau of Labor Statistics recently found that 73% of companies offered little to no telework in September. That was a big leap from 60% in 2021. Major companies, including the ones that have done massive layoffs, are mandating that workers come in and show up in person at the workplace. But for some workers, the choice has been between coming back or getting fired. But Felicia, she says she's seeing herself out. For a year and a half, her office had a hybrid model, 3 days at home, 2 days in the office. She described it as the perfect work-life balance. She said she got a lot more work done when she was working the hybrid days, referring to the days that she spent at home. She said in the office there were distractions and interruptions. She couldn't keep up with her workload. She was going home and working 4 hours because she couldn't get the work done at work. Oh, trust me, I know how that is because of all the freaking stupid office meetings that people have. Whenever you show up in person, it's always like, hey, let's hop into this meeting where you're not going to contribute and it doesn't even matter. And you just wasted 2 hours in the meeting and they didn't even feed you during the lunch break. Oh, and your lunch breaks, you don't even have time for your lunch break. Totally get it. Um, so sitting in traffic, all the time that you waste in commuting, asking yourself, is this really what I want to be doing with my life? Listen, I get it. There are jobs that you absolutely have to show up with, right? If you're doing landscaping, you're doing certain types of jobs, Caleb Vanderfelt's, you got to show up to the repair shop, or you got to show up to do, the repair work at Chemna Collision Repair. It is what it is. But some people can do their jobs completely remotely. Some people have that kind of flexibility, and they probably should be offered that kind of flexibility because people who are getting those kinds of pay, this 100,000 plus, are probably the type of people that you need to have some flexibility with when it comes to work-life balance. I don't know if she's more efficient. I think the problem is that middle managers have a really hard time figuring out the productivity of these employees. And since everybody's lazy, but I mean, so are middle managers, they don't want to come up with the systems that are required in order to determine just how productive their employees are. And listen, I have an employee, and when they work remotely, you always wonder, oh, are they being as productive as they would if they were being in person? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, but you got to come up with a way to be able to determine that. And, that's really on the middle manager. So tough to say. So you guys are still on the national divorce topic. Well, we are going to move on to Christina Buttons, who's going to be joining us here. I'm going to go send to a quick commercial break. And why, Austin, do you go to so many commercial breaks? Well, one, I want to make money because I'm a capitalist, and I'm not ashamed of that, even though people are trying to shame me. They've been trying to capitalism shame me this last week for my products over at apforlibertyshop.com, which are totally awesome. But I don't feel ashamed, right? Because they're like, oh, I listened when you shared your points of view. Well, you must not be watching the Wake Up America show then, baby, because I give my points of view 2 hours a day, man. This is 10 hours of content a week. Get lots of my points of view. You just got to watch the show. And visit apforlibertyshop.com. Let's go get Christina Buttons. When I get back, we're going to talk to her about why she quit the Daily Wire and the difference between gender ideology and gender dysphoria. We'll talk about that when we get back on the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
Want an engaging website to boost your business? You're just a click away from 5-star Fiverr talent. Hundreds of freelancer skills like web design. Head to Fiverr.com today and get something started.
American conservatism is distinct, like America is distinct from the United Kingdom. American conservatism's roots comes out of the Wild West, out of pioneerism. The difference between American conservatives and European conservatives is that Americans are cowboys. We are that God, guns, gold, and girls. It's wild here, and we should stay that way. We shouldn't allow a European version of conservatism to come and infect us here. We like it wide open spaces here, deep in the heart of Texas and all that.
Hey there, it's your favorite Vice President Joe Biden. I wanted to talk to you today about the Wake Up America show, the best source for all your political news and commentary. But before I get started, let me just make sure I have all my notes in order. Okay, where was I? All right, the Wake Up America show. It's a great way to stay informed and make your voice heard. Boy, what was I saying again? Oh, right. The Wake Up America show. It's important that we all stay engaged and knowledgeable about what's going on in our country and, the thing. But hold on, where was I going with all this? Oh, yeah. The Wake Up America show. It's a fantastic resource. And if you really want to make a difference, man, you can sign up to be a monthly donor at wakeupAmericaShow.com/support. Now, where was I? Oh, that's right, the Wake Up America show. So if you want to stay woke and support a great cause, head on over to wakeupamerica.show.com/support and sign up to be a monthly donor today. And if you're feeling generous, you can even give a donation in my name. Thanks for listening, and keep on keeping on, America. Come on, man.
George. Thank you for watching the Wake Up America show with my dad. Today, I'd like to share with you 3 reasons why you should visit Dad's online store at apforlibertyshop.com. Number 1. You can get exclusive freedom-loving merch designed by AP himself or me mum, Steffi. Liberty Laura has made some designs as well, and blimey, they are great! Number 2. Most of these products are so wicked that they aren't even allowed to be advertised on Facebook or Instagram. Modern machine guns and a proper keychain. Plus, our Grover Cleveland t-shirt is so spicy apparently that leftists on Facebook like you. Spend your money where you earn it, and you help me Pops build a community that supports what you believe. Bloody hell! This commercial is running too long. Gotta run. Bye now. Don't forget to visit apforlibertyshop.com. That's apforlibertyshop.com.
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show at wakeupamerica.show.com. How are y'all feeling out there today? Good. Loving all those positive vibes that I'm seeing over there for the commenters in the chat. Thanks so much for joining us today. If you're enjoying the show so far, make sure you click that like button or offer us a Rumble. If you're over on Rumble, we are live streaming there as well as on Twitch and on Facebook and Twitter as well. Glad to have you all here today. So what is the difference between gender dysphoria and gender ideology? I think there's a lot of confusion in these two terms. And what happened to my next guest, who had a very short-lived career with one of our conservative outlets, the Daily Wire? Let's hear it from the horse's mouth herself. Christina Buttons is joining us right now. She's a classical liberal. She's an independent journalist, and she's joining us on the program right now. Good morning, Christina. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me. Nice to talk to you again.
Yeah, Christina, thanks so much for joining us today. Lovely to see you there from Nashville today. Glad to have you. I guess I brought you on here today for a couple reasons. The first one was, I think, the most important thing, the big brain topic here, which I think more people really need to understand. On your Twitter timeline, you were kind of breaking down the difference between, what is truly a mental health question of the gender dysphoria issue that we're discussing here in mainstream society with transgenderism, and then the question of the more of the sort of social contagion, if you will, or the ideology of gender. And you were sort of trying to really draw a distinction and a straight line between the two of these things here. Would you care to kind of extrapolate or expand on that topic here this morning for our listeners?
Yeah, one of the things that I see a lot in gender critical discourse, especially people who are sort of new or have started talking about this recently, like within the last year. A lot of people seem to sort of conflate what gender dysphoria and gender ideology are. They're two different things. I mean, gender dysphoria describes the experience that people feel with their discomfort within their sex and their desire to be perceived as the opposite sex. And it can look like all different kinds of things. And it's been around for a long time. I mean, we have research on it from the 60s where people described, they called it transsexual. And today, what we're seeing is something different. There's a set of beliefs that sort of come from postmodernism in the college humanities departments. From the 90s, we saw gender studies and queer theory and all of these beliefs that, I mean, what an ideology is a set of beliefs or a belief system, and they're not necessarily supported by evidence or supported by reality. Like, that's what postmodernism is. It's like a rejection of the scientific pursuit of objective truth. It's nonsense, really, but it's completely mainstream now. But it's not the same thing as gender dysphoria, because all kinds of people can hold these ideological beliefs about gender. We have gender affirming doctors and, the cis allies. Those are all gender ideologues or proponents of gender ideology. So to say that, all trans people are gender ideologues isn't true, because we know plenty of transsexual people who do not hold ideological beliefs about gender. They're just feel a certain way and they present in a certain way that makes them more comfortable. I mean, for the most part, a lot of people, there are a lot of libertarian and conservative transsexuals, and they don't support the medical transition of children or males in women's sports or prisons, other things like that. And I think it's important to distinguish between the two, because you're going to be a lot more successful getting your ideas across and getting people to listen to you if you don't conflate them.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. And one thing is really a strategy. The other is more of a technical and medical understanding of things. In the question of being able to advance our ideas, what I think of as as libertarians, we are sort of at war with people who are advancing an ideology, but I'm not at war with people who are struggling with actual mental health issues. Now, I find myself, sometimes, struggling to see the difference, because there are, of course, people who are who struggle with gender dysphoria who also embrace the gender politics, which makes this a little bit more difficult to suss out. But the more I think people understand the difference between the two, I think the better. But it's too easy to conflate, I think, sometimes. So your argument, I guess, essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the more we understand the differences between the two, the more we can effectively combat the more Marxist approach to in academia that is sort of saddled with these ideas, and then we can also offer a different approach to people who are actually struggling with mental health issues. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. And, part of the problem that we have too is being on Twitter and on social media, we're just constantly seeing like the worst the trans community has to offer in our timelines, because that's, those are the posts that go viral. But there's millions of people who identify as transgender for all different kinds of reasons. The distinctions matter. They're not all one type of person. I mean, I hate to say this, but like the people who have the strongest opinions about transgender and transsexual people, I don't think they know any of them in real life, but yet they have the strongest opinions about them. And that was sort of the realization I came to when I left the left. When we last talked, I think you were the first person about it. My experience, working for this progressive page and deciding to leave there was, I was working with all of these Democrats who had very, very strong negative opinions about Republicans. And I just felt like none of them actually knew them in real life. No one ever had a conversation or interacted with them. So that's why I reached out to challenge my preconceived notions and try to understand where they were coming from. And I feel like people would benefit from doing that now. I mean, not counting on.
I mean, yeah, and not to pat
That's my
myself on the
hope.
back or anything, but I mean, you were probably kind of lucky that I was one of the first people that you ran into because, like you, I am more of a classical liberal. I don't share the same views that many social conservatives do about this question, who react to transgenderism and gender dysphoria with blatant all-out hostility, and they put the people who have gender dysphoria in the same camp as people who have gender ideology. People like yourself and
Mhm.
myself draw a little bit more of a distinction between these kinds of things and probably tend to have a little bit more compassion towards these people than our social conservative
Yeah.
friends do on the aisle. And when you left the left, when you and I first met, we had a lot of these kinds of conversations, and it was easy to sort of have a conversation with someone like myself. But then you came into contact with more of what I would call, perhaps, I wouldn't like to even say the hard right, but really just the social conservative right, and your experience working with the Daily Wire, which
Mhm.
was short lived. Do you want to explain that to us?
Yeah. I was writing articles on this subject, pretty much exclusively writing articles about issues with gender stuff. And I got poached from another outlet. The Daily Wire hired me. They wanted me to write exclusively on this issue, more like investigative style reporting. So I was open to doing that in the beginning. And then it just sort of grew to be more and more uncomfortable with the stronger stances they took that didn't seem to. I mean, people keep saying that I left because Matt Walsh was too mean, but that's not really true. It wasn't too mean. It was just wrong about a lot of things. And it was the Knowles speech was the weekend that I left too. That just, it didn't sit right with me. I didn't
Can you
want
explain why?
to be associated with I didn't want to be associated with that particular brand of we need to eradicate transgenderism from public life. It just shows again that they don't understand the distinctions between gender dysphoria and gender ideology. I think most reasonable people would agree with us if we present this information in a way that other people could, we have all of the evidence and the arguments and the moral high ground on our side. So let's use it, you know?
Right. How should we respond to these two different groups? I assume that you would suggest that perhaps the way that we deal with these two distinct groups that you've identified here should probably be different, because the gender ideology versus people who suffer from gender dysphoria, those people are attacking our values. Those are the people who attack values like free speech. These are the people who advocate for things like laws that would punish people for misgendering and things like that. I mean, those people are the enemy of people like yourself, classical liberals, people who believe in the fundamental rights of free speech and freedom. But they demand that we engage in a willful denial of reality. Like, I have friends who are transgender and who suffer from gender dysphoria. Not so many friends that are more of the ideology side of things, although I do have a few of those as well. But I don't treat the people who are the transsexuals who are struggling with mental illness the same way that I treat the people who are the ideologues, who are attacking free speech and attacking the fundamental underpinnings of our society. Would you suggest that that's the right approach, that we should react with hostility to the gender ideologues and then separate our response to people who are struggling with mental illness? I mean, that's what I do. I wonder what you think about that approach.
I would say to challenge their beliefs, challenge policies, challenge their actions, and not necessarily them as people. I think that's That's what I would say.
Yeah, it's certainly it's a difficult.
I mean,
Go ahead.
well, I've talked to actually a few people who I think would be classified as TRAs, like a trans right activist, and I've managed to have some pretty good conversations with them and find some common ground. So I mean, people appear online as like hyper aggressive, and it's part of the problem that we have is with, you know, a lot of people, their only like engagement with, you know, the other side is through online communication, where people are just sort of like hyper aggressive and but when you actually have like conversations with them, like it's a totally different experience.
I get that, but I mean,
I
what are
mean, we
your
just see the worst of each other online.
Yeah, I get that, but what about that the story of that swimmer the other day who was literally had to barricade herself in from violent TRA activists who were attacking her for voicing her opinion about, biological males competing against females in sports like swimming. I mean, that's dangerous.
Hmm. Yeah, it is. I would hope people would have security, and I think it's good that those videos are being shared to show like this behavior is not acceptable and it's not safe, and it shouldn't be tolerated. I mean, we should have some more safeguards put in to keep people who are hyped up and aggressive away from others.
Christina, do you have a personal point of view when it comes to, biological males competing against females in sports, potentially losing scholarships, losing, their opportunities because they simply can't compete against someone who is stronger, faster, harder, better at a sport because of their biological advantages? Do you have a viewpoint on that?
Yeah, if a male has gone through male puberty, there's competing with other women.